All right, so now we're about to wrap this up. Before I
Sure.
let you get out of here, man, you have such a great story about how your grandfather came over, and I know this has nothing to do with mental toughness. This is for you and me, really. I mean,
Yeah.
but I love this story, and I want to get it on tape about your grandfather coming to Australia. And if would you mind sharing that
Sure,
with
not
us?
a problem.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'll give you two stories. The first one is my maternal grandfather, and he gave me the life advice I just love. And he said, Craig, the only time you ever start at the top is when you're digging a hole. And
Right? That
it's
was yeah. Wow. So if you're on the top, maybe you ought to just look. Am I digging myself a hole here? Right.
that's
If that's
exactly
where you
it.
started.
You
Yeah.
know, my paternal grandfather was a man that he's always had strong convictions, and a lot of this I discovered after his death. Some of it he talked to me about, and effectively he was from the Ukraine, and the Ukraine in the 1930s. So the Russian revolutions occurred, the Soviet Union exists. There's still some anti-Soviet sentiment. There's people that don't like the Bolsheviks, and they're printing literature. And his family ran a store. So, his mum, his dad, his brother, his sisters, and their family and kids. He wasn't married, so his father sent him off to Kiev on a buying trip for the store. There was some stuff that he wanted in. On his way, he had no other means of transport other than walk, so he's walked, and he's talking to all the farmers along the way. He's waving hello. Everyone's having a chat. Vasil, how's everything going? All good. On his way, he's done the buying trip. On the way back, he's looking at everyone, and nobody will make eye contact. Everybody turns and walks the other way. And one farmer with his pitchfork on his shoulder walks past him and deliberately shoulder bumps him. And my grandfather's turned around, and this farmer's just whispered, hasn't even turned to face him, just said, "Don't go home." So what's the first thing he does? He breaks into a run. He's heading for home. He wants to see what's happening. He's gone over this little rise, a few kilometres later. He's gone over this little rise. There's Red Army trucks around there. There's his family being herded. His father's already been shot and killed.
Oh, no.
He's outside the front of the shop. What the family were doing is they were some of the group that were printing literature in the back of the shop.
So it was anti-Soviet.
Anti-Soviet literature.
Mm.
So they're printing it. Somebody's either informed on them, or it doesn't matter. There's Red Army, there's NKVD police. His father's already been shot. His brother and his sisters and their extended families are herded onto these trucks. And he does what any loving son would do. He's cried out, he wants this to stop. Soldiers have turned and they fired 2 rounds at him. The first one's come through, that's through and through his shoulder. He's turned and run. The next one hit him in the back, ran around his rib cage and popped out the front. Lucky man, didn't hit his lungs. He's ended up in Kiev. He basically stopped thinking about his family and started thinking about his own survival. Gets into Kiev. Kiev was a pretty rough place. He gets patched up and they help him get to Poland. Well, he gets into Poland, he's there for a while, and then in 1939 he gets sandwiched between the Soviet army invading Poland from the east and the German army invading Poland from the west. I don't want to be caught by the Soviets, so he passes through the Polish lines and gets into the German side. Ends up in Germany. He's a guest worker. Because he's not Jewish, he's taken in, he gets to work. He meets a woman on a farm, they get married. Within a couple of years, my eldest uncle and my father are born. By 1944, my grandmother's pregnant with another child. So, rolls around, Germany's going pear-shaped. They're in what was Eastern Germany. The Soviet army is still pushing towards, so he's still on the run from the Soviets in 44. But he's got bigger issues. He's got a crumbling Germany. He's got a regime that is quite brutal there. They want everybody doing what they need to do. So he makes the decision to go further west. He gets through, he's on forged papers, and they're heading towards Belgium. And they're crossing this bridge, Gestapo on the train, checking papers. His wife and kids are travelling on genuine papers. He's dressed as a woman dressed as a woman on forged papers.
On forged papers in drag, and here comes the Gestapo.
That's it. You know, you could make a Monty Python skit out of this.
Yeah, right.
But this was
Except it's
all very
real.
serious.
Yeah.
This is December 44. He jumps from the train over a bridge. It's dark. He doesn't know what he's going into. The family get to where they're going. They pass the checks. They're at the train station. They don't know what to do. 6 hours after they arrive, he arrives. He's back in men's clothing. He's not wearing women's clothing. His paperwork has disappeared. And he says to the family, all right, we need to keep going. We have to get to Belgium. What he didn't realise was that the German army, where he was in Belgium, he was just near the Ardennes. He's just ahead of the German army as they launch Operation Baseplate, which Americans will know became the Battle of the Bulge.
Right.
So the German army's attacking. He just wants to get through the American lines. He just wants to get on the other side. He's a refugee. He just doesn't want to be near war. And he certainly doesn't want to be near the Soviets.
So
he doesn't want to be with the Germans anymore.
Right.
He's seen some of the things that have happened there. He wants to get on, and he doesn't care whether it's French, Canadians, British. He just wants on the other side.
Right.
They pass through this moving line, and they get picked up by an American unit. They get interred as refugees. They get sent to France. They're put in a camp there. After a while in the camp there, he gets sent off. They see the name Moroz. They think Ukrainian. They think Jewish. They send him to Palestine. There's a refugee camp in Palestine. In Palestine, they say, you're not Jewish. He says, I know.
He said, I know.
So
yeah, thanks.
He's there in 1948. Now, 1948 is when the nation of Israel
right.
is being formed. You know, there's all sorts of things happening. You know, you've got the Haganah doing their work. You've got the British being kicked out. You know, the whole Palestinian Authority is crumbling, and he's got this going around, and he's in a refugee camp. Now, he hasn't really had a home since they left Germany in 44. By this stage, he doesn't have 3 kids. He's got 4 kids. So he had time for other things as well.
Well, apparently he did.
So they've then got on a boat, and they were told, well, this boat's either going to New Zealand or Australia. And he said, I don't care. They come out to Australia, they arrive, and there's different camps set up. And the refugee camp he's sent to is in Orange. Now, Orange is in mid-western New South Wales. It has 2 seasons, summer and winter. Winter, Orange does get snow. It gets cold. They're in tents. And they're told, the Australian government, we've brought you in, you're refugees. We don't care about the UN Charter. Here's how it's going to be. You've got 6 months. 6 months, every one of you, 6 months to find a permanent home, to find an employment, to be in schools and be able to read, write and speak English. 6 months.
You got 6 months or you're out.
6 months or you're back on the next boat.
Back on the next boat.
You're going back. You sort it out.
Yeah.
You know, not like today where, you know, people will arrive and, you know, we'll put you in accommodation and we'll look after you and we'll charge you as an illegal alien and we'll hear the case, and that'll take about 8 years and eventually we'll just let you stay. So he's given 6 months, and there's a company there. The company was called, and I thought this was rather forward thinking, little did they know, but it was called Email. And Email was a subsidiary of Kelvinator making white goods, refrigerators and so forth. And there's a couple of jobs going, one as a machinist and another as a typist. And he goes in, and he's always had a gift for languages, and I'm glad that kind of passed on to me as well. With that gift for languages, he's been able to pick up English. He picked up a lot of English in Israel, and he picked up, or in Palestine to become Israel, on the boats. He was questioning English speakers, and he was trying to converse with them. He just immersed himself in English.
Because that's where he's going. Is either Australia or New Zealand.
What do they
English
speak? They speak
right,
English.
Right.
So he's learning this. He's getting this under his belt, and they said, well, there's jobs as machinists or typists. And he said, I can type.
Could he type?
He couldn't type. He didn't even have a typewriter. And even what he would have been used to would have been either German built, which, it's the keystrokes are effectively the same, or it would have been the Cyrillic alphabet that he was used to, that he'd grown up with.
In the Ukraine, yeah.
And he'd seen printing press, but he hadn't seen a typewriter. So he went out and he asked around the camp, does anybody have a typewriter? Does anybody know where there's a typewriter? And they found a typewriter. And he said, I need to borrow it. And they said, you can't borrow it. And he said, okay, then I need a piece of cardboard and I need a pen. And on a piece of cardboard, he mapped out where were the keys. where was the tab, how could you do uppercase, lowercase? And
so he
went
basically
home.
drew out the
Keyboard
on a piece of cardboard
on
to
a
go
piece of
home and
cardboard
practice.
to go home and practice. And he
For his
practiced
typing test the next day.
for his typing test. So he's gone away and he's practiced and he's practiced and he's practiced, and they needed to get 35 words a minute. Well, he smashed it. He smashed it. They said, good, we'll hire you as a typist. So here he was, up until 24 hours before, he hadn't even seen a typewriter, and now he's passed a test in English. And I said to him one day, that was in English, how did you go? And he said, the English words were written, I just had to type them. I just had to match that funny looking thing with that funny looking thing. And as long as I did that, and I thought about which one and I looked for the keys, because I'd practiced where the keys were, it was a little bit easier. How long did you practice? He said, all night. And that was his motivation to get an opportunity.
Is that where you kind of get your can-do attitude, man, you think?
I think it must be. You know,
Because,
between the two
yeah,
grandfathers.
He's got less than 12 hours. He tells them I can type, and then
I can type.
Yeah, he ain't even seen a typewriter.
He retired.
That's just so awesome.
Retired from Kelvinator, which was subsequently bought out by General Electric. He retired from there in 1981. So he was employed from, by this stage, you know, by the time they get there, it's kind of 51.
Yeah, 51.
51 to 81. So he had 30 years with the one company.
Wow.
And he'd worked the entire production line. Started as a typist, and he finished as a quality control supervisor.
Wow.
And you know, that he ended up raising 5 children. All 5 children had effectively college educations. 3 of his children became teachers, and you know, he was later given an award for the work that he did amongst refugees, and particularly the Ukrainian community, so that they didn't lose their language, they didn't lose their culture. But interestingly, with Pop, in the home, only English was spoken, because with all that, despite all of that, people will look at that today and say, oh, the Australian government was so harsh. And after all that, he said, we're so privileged to be in this country that we need to recognise this. The only language at home is English. This is the language of our country. That's the least I can do to say thank you for all the opportunities I've been given.
Wow.
And that was kind of the thing.
It's a whole different mindset, yeah.
Completely different mindset. What have I got to do to make things better for my wife and my kids? And he took every one of those, not as a barrier, it was just an opportunity.
And you think of all the stuff that he lost, you could be focusing on all the stuff that I lost, and a lot of people would have destroyed him.
Yeah.
Instead, he's looking forward and being grateful.
Yeah.
And this is one of the great mental toughness tools, is if you're starting to be grateful of what you have, suddenly everything changes because you're being grateful. And I just love that story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
My pleasure.
Bro,
My pleasure.
Thanks for sitting down with me.
No worries.
And what I would like this to do is, you know, whether you do it with me or not, just get a lot of these. You have so many stories, and they're so great that you would just get that down and just
I will be
record
doing
them.
that.
Yeah, record them. And because I don't want to, I would hate to see that history lost. I mean, you have so many great stories in there, and so then I wanted to get this one down for sure because it's just such a great story, and it's you know, Pop's already gone from the planet, and and you saw the bullet holes though.
Yeah.
And so it's been verified.
That story is
Grandma
verified.
said, he was in drag and he jumped off the train, and because you were having a hard time believing some of it at first.
Some of it at first.
Verified.
Once I suspended disbelief and then actively verified.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Do you know, one point before we wrap up, I go back in history, and the people that were the most respected were the elders with grey hair, and how they interacted was they told stories.
Right.
And you're so right. I got to get these things down,
You
and
do,
I
man.
will get these down.
Right. That's we got it here on day. He promised, so
I
we're gonna
did.
hold you to it, man.
Yeah, I've made another promise. I've met that. Now I've got to make this one.
You came here on a promise, and
Absolutely.
and you even great personal expense. And I so appreciate it. I love you, man, and you're just a huge part of.
And that goes both ways.
Well, I appreciate you, brother. Thanks, Jacko.